Sweetheart, be reasonable. After all, we're married.
Consider that a divorce.
Welcome to the Hollywood in Toto podcast, the right take on entertainment. The HiT cast offers a weekly look at Hollywood from a conservative point of view. Sick of media bias infecting Hollywood headlines? Tired of stars insulting your views? HiT has your back. Now, here's your host, Christian Toto.
Welcome to episode 137 of the Hollywood in Toto podcast, the right take on entertainment. This week we talk with Midge Costin, the director of an excellent new documentary called Making Waves. It's all about sound design and editing, something that makes the best movies even better, even if we so rarely stop to thank those responsible for it. Making Waves rights that wrong, and it's fine entertainment too. You know, to this film critic, 2019 was a terrible year for movies, until a few weeks ago. Yes, Toy Story 4 crushed it, and Avengers Endgame mostly lived up to the hype. I could have used a nip or tuck in the middle section, but overall, a good time was had by all. Otherwise, it's been a really bad year for movies. The Hustle, Godzilla King of the Monsters, Midsommar, The Dead Don't Die. Ugh. And then along came Joker a few weeks ago, which jumped right to the top of my best of the year list. And now it's got some company. Jojo Rabbit follows a German boy who longs to join Hitler's army. He's got the next best thing, though, an imaginary friend named Adolf Hitler. Now, you walk into Jojo Rabbit fearing another Trump is Hitler kind of speech, or even a story that reminds us that those Nazis were bad, bad people. Yeah, we get that. I think even millennials and their lack of historical context get that too. So what else could Jojo Rabbit do? Well, how about deliver some really big laughs, a compelling story, and the best child acting I've seen in ages? Take a bow, Roman Griffin Davis, in your screen debut, no less. Now, not everyone will be on board with Jojo Rabbit. The film mixes some really grand slapstick with images of dead Jewish people. It's completely understandable that some won't buy into that blend, or that Nazi gags at all are just never to anyone's taste. Yes, we've seen the producers, and we've laughed and laughed for decades, but it's still a tough subject. That is a reasonable stance. I get it. But not this, though. And by this, I mean what Showbiz 411 said about Jojo Rabbit. Here we go. At a time when hate crimes are up, anti-Semitic attacks have increased, and there is no guidance from our leaders, particularly Donald Trump, in denouncing these attacks, Jojo Rabbit is a recipe for trouble. Whew! Didn't we just do this dance with Joker? Man, modern critics are finding more and more reasons to find art problematic or troubling or unacceptable or, in this case, a recipe for trouble. It's art. And just because deep down in your heart you think Orange Man bad, you can't let that flavor your thinking in every other scenario. Here's the bottom line. If you're eager for a black comedy with bite, that has big laughs and has wonderful performances, including Sam Rockwell, great again, please check out Jojo Rabbit. And now here's the HiT tweet of the week. Ronnie, baby, we missed you. All right, I missed you. I haven't seen a ton of tweets from Sons of Anarchy alum Ron Perlman lately. Well, he's back on Twitter, and this one is as good as anything he's tweeted before. And by good, I mean unhinged. The subject is Attorney General Bill Barr, and that's all the context you need given the recent headlines. Here we go. I truly believe he has waited his entire life to be a leading player in a world that exemplifies white supremacy and fascism. There is no other explanation. This is his moment, his world, his wet dream. Can you imagine actually having those thoughts cross your mind? It's amazing.
You're listening to the Hollywood in Toto podcast, the right take on entertainment.
My HiT tip of the week is Crawl. Kaya Scodelario stars as a college swimmer, and oh yeah, that skill's going to come in handy, trying to find her father in the middle of a hurricane. Dear old dad, played by Barry Pepper, is trapped in his own home's basement. But that's not the problem here. The water is rising, and a gaggle of crocodiles are circling the neighborhood and the house.
All residents must evacuate immediately. Grab your families, your loved ones, and get out.
Dad!
We won't be able to come for you.
Dad!
Now, Crawl is a well-executed B-movie. Full stop. The leads are very talented, though, and I have to say, they're a bit too good for this kind of film. Still, their performances really elevate the material and even give their father-daughter bond some real pathos. I was kind of taken aback by that in a good way. Now, you're here for the thrills, though, and Crawl never loses sight of that. Now, I don't think the stars are going to be brushing up on their award acceptance speeches anytime soon, but horror fans are going to get a kick out of this one. It does get a little repetitive toward the end, I will give you that, but fine special effects, good performances, and thrill after thrill, and it's all you want. And Crawl is available right now on Blu-ray and video-on-demand services.
Don't touch that dial. You're listening to my daddy's podcast.
Think about your favorite movie moments. Chances are there's a team of sound experts who helped make it better, probably much better. Think about rain hitting a tin roof, or a vicious punch in a fight scene that lands with an audio wallop. What about that T-Rex that we've seen so many times and its unmistakable roar? That's sound design, that's the work of sound editors making it possible. And the new documentary, Making Waves, captures the hard work and artistry of the best sound designers and editors. Director Midge Costin should know. She's a veteran sound editor whose resume includes Crimson Tide, The Rock, and Armageddon. Now, Midge shares some secrets behind some sequences in the film Making Waves, and also some classic sound design moments. That was my favorite part of the movie. Now, you're not going to hear a film the same way again after watching Making Waves, which is in select theaters right now. And I hope you feel the same way after listening to this conversation. Here's my interview with Making Waves director, Midge Costin. Well, Midge, your new film shows how sound gurus like Ben Bird and Walter Murch, they started tinkering with sound when they were kids. They were experimenting with things on their tape recorders. It sounds like you kind of came into the sound field in a different way as an adult. Is that true? And maybe just tell real briefly about how you kind of embraced this part of filmmaking.
Well, it's really funny when I think back. When I was in fifth grade for Christmas, I got a reel-to-reel tape recorder. And I think the reason it was true that at film school, I would have panic attacks when I had to do sound because it just seemed technical and I wasn't relating it to story and character. And so it wasn't until I got out in the world and then I took a job, as I say, I lowered myself and took a sound job for the money so I could finish my thesis film. And then I discovered, but I think the reason it clicked in is because I had a background in music. I used to sing in choir and chorus and I played the guitar. And so I think that's why
Gotcha.
It kind of clicked once I did start.
Your career speaks for itself, but did it happen? When it happened, was there sort of a sense that, oh, maybe this is my path? I mean, or did it take a while to kind of really get enmeshed in it and realize that this was your career journey?
I think it happened pretty quickly after I started because right away I was the only effects editor on this show that a friend of mine had called me in to do, and I went, "Oh my God, how do I set mood and tone?" Because I started breaking down, character, mood, tone, like what am I doing with this location? And because I had studied film and considered myself a filmmaker, it's like I think I got it right away that this is my responsibility.
Now, during your career, you worked with a lot of high-profile projects, a lot of named directors. Was there one you can look back on and thought, I really worked the best with him or her? We just sort of were on the same page. They valued it as much as I did. And anyone jump to mind?
Yeah, I would say that the Tony Scott film Crimson Tide, I loved that, working on that one. And I think I just loved the story. I love Gene Hackman and Denzel Washington and their relationship. And, it wasn't just kind of a roller coaster ride, crazy action adventure, but there was something deeper to it. The other one that was cool was my last one before I got in the union was a show called Imagine John Lennon. And it was a documentary that was so great because we had access to the Lenono library. And I just learned so much about John and Yoko, and I really hadn't followed, him after the Beatles, and so that was like a really cool,
I can imagine. No pun intended.
project.
There's a quote early in your movie, Making Waves. I forget the talking head who says it, but he says, "We're seemingly oblivious to the power of sound in movies." And I thought, given your career, given your passion for it, was that a key motivating factor behind making this movie in the first place? To kind of, hey, you're not realizing just how integral sound is, moviegoers. Let's sort of give a refresher course and let people know about that.
Yes, I think that is exactly what motivated me. And it was once because I had not thought about it, even after going to film school for 3 years, and it wasn't until after that I realized, oh my God, it's 50% of the story. And the other thing is it makes you aware of sound in your life and how important it is and emotional and how much you're being affected by it. So, and then I have to say that I'm totally passionate about sound, but my first love might even be teaching. And so even when I was in the 90s during those big, crazy, action adventure movies, I would try to teach when I could at USC so that I could tell, young filmmakers, like, here are these tools, use this and use it on better films that I'm working on. Well, because action adventure just wasn't my genre, but that's what I was working on for sound, which was pretty cool. It's a good place to work on sound.
Yeah. The movie has a lot of perfect examples of sound from the Star Wars sequences, Raiders of the Lost Ark. You focus in on Alfred Hitchcock and how he really appreciated the pageantry of sound. For people who haven't seen the movie quite yet, can you maybe tease a little bit more about his ability to kind of coax great scenes with sound? Just kind of paint your picture from your perspective.
Yes. Well, what's really cool is I think that Hitchcock did that in every aspect of his filmmaking. He was really detail oriented. So he used to actually make sound notes. And in The Birds, there's no music in The Birds, which always surprises people. And also those birds were like created. They were kind of a processed sound. It wasn't like real birds. And, but they get used like music, kind of music concrete. So, and it was cool because, I almost was afraid to use that clip from The Birds, because literally she opens the door and then she goes into a room and you're hearing absolutely nothing, it sounds like. And then she, sucks a breath in when she sees the birds and then suddenly she's attacked. So it's a lot about dynamic range, like keep it quiet and then the loud sound, the sound gets you. So Hitchcock really was great with that.
Yeah, well, that's one of the lessons of the film is that you can't have a sound bed, you can't have orchestration throughout an entire movie. There's got to be an ebb and a flow to make you appreciate it so you don't get your senses sort of overwhelmed. Your film has a ridiculous amount of talent. Ang Lee, Robert Redford, Steven Spielberg, it goes on and on, Barbra Streisand. I get the sense that they were itching to talk about this topic and that helped you get these big names, or maybe just your perspective. How did you land so many?
It was all through their sound people. I'm at USC, and George Lucas and Steven Spielberg actually gave an endowed chair, for sound because they care enough about sound. So I knew them through USC, but and then, it was the editors, a lot of the supervising editors and sound designers I knew, but it was just going through them, and they were doing it for their sound people because they really care, and they were anxious to talk about it. The one that's the funny one is that she didn't know herself was Barbra Streisand had no idea that she was making, cinema history, because it was Johan Allen, who's the senior vice president of Dolby. And the reason he is that he was the one that he was the engineer for Dolby and went up to Ray Dolby and said, what about getting into movies? And Ray said, well, you could check it out. He goes to all the studios and they're all like, yeah, it sounds good. Now, Dolby was giving us stereo, but also noise reduction. Mm-hmm. And they all were like, no, it sounds good, but we don't really need it. And of course, what they're thinking is how much money is it going to cost for them to switch over to stereo sound. But then Barbra Streisand was doing Star is Born, and she just thought it was an option. She said, oh, no, we definitely want this. So she said yes. And then Stanley Kubrick was doing, not
The Shining.
The crazy kind of rape film.
Clockwork Orange.
Clockwork Orange, yeah. Anyway, and Stanley Kubrick was doing Clockwork Orange, and they both wanted it and said, no, oh, this would be great. And they were big enough directors and making the studios enough money. They said yes. And then the next year, George Lucas and Gary Kurtz were doing Star Wars. So they all wanted it, and the studio switched as a result of them being interested enough in sound to say, no, we definitely want this. And Barbra Streisand had no idea. She just thought it was, she remembers saying yes to it, but didn't know that it wasn't already in the works, So that was quite interesting.
For people in the sound field, designers, editors, is there something that kind of unites them? I mean, I'm sure there's different personalities, different quirks, maybe they have different working techniques, but for people who gravitate toward that field, is there anything that kind of is similar about their approach in any way?
I don't know. I think not really. I think, well, what you said at the beginning, it's like, sometimes it's that I think almost all of them, when I talked to them, did have a recorder when they were kids. And I think, I think it was Walter Murch when I was talking to him, and maybe Ben Burt, that it's like, it's that thing about you put your, 1,000, 10,000 hours in. And I think, and also Walter had a theory that whatever you do between the ages of 11 and 14, which is kind of fun for you, you end up, it has something to do with your career. So I think it's that putting the time in and then realizing, oh, this is important, it's emotional. It's like, I think when you have fun with it as a kid, it might be something that, kind of grabs you and you can easily see yourself doing. And there is a certain kind of patience, and, there are people who listen, and I think it's probably just that they had careers. Now, sometimes too, it's they had a musical background. And, otherwise we don't really have a consciousness about sound. That's what's really interesting. It's about how our brains work, because vision, we can all say color, light, shade, framing. But when you go to use words, we don't have the words for sound unless you've studied music.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, part of the movie talks about A Star Is Born, Barbra Streisand, talking about we just kind of touch on some of the innovations she brought. Do you get the sense that Hollywood today, the studio system today, is more open, amenable, more aggressive in pursuing sound and different techniques? Like it sounds like it was more of a battle maybe in the 70s and maybe even earlier with the studios were kind of cookie cutter-esque. Do you think that maybe the Hollywood of today is more appreciative of sound, or is there still that tension? Oh, it's just visual. I
think, when I talk to people about the movie, a lot of people say, oh, yes, sound is so important. But still, when it comes to budget, when it comes to, recognizing people, it's funny how, even though people say it, the budget, the time, is not given. And it really comes down to, it's the filmmakers themselves. Are they giving enough time? Do they have a sound designer that they'd give the script to? Do they start it? Because and this is breaking sound and music apart, because they might they might work with the composer over and over. Are they giving their sound people the same amount of time, to work on things? So it's interesting. I mean, honestly, I'm at a film festival here. It's wonderful in Belgium at Ghent, and we gave an award for. I was on the jury, and we gave an award for best film, and then we gave an award for best score and sound design, and they put the composer's name on on the certificate, but they didn't put the sound designers, and they were like, oh, sorry, so there's still something about. But if I can just say too, what happens in sound is, like, when people don't notice it, yes, you kind of like, of course they didn't notice, but it also works for us because it doesn't hit you over the head. Mm-hmm. And, so the sound, you don't want it to hit you over the head. You don't really want to bring attention to it. You want it to work with the picture. So it's not sound for sound's sake. It's very much sound with picture. And there's an alchemy that kind of happens. And, so in a lot of ways, it works in our favor because we can kind of, it sounds bad to use the word manipulate, but we can almost kind of manipulate the audience mood, tone, but it's more subtle than music.
Yeah. And I guess that when it does stand out, it's when you notice it. Maybe that's in a bad thing. I was kind of curious, are there the film Making Waves brings up a lot of classic movies, and you can understand the power of the sound and why they were so integral. Are there movies that you've watched over the years that, maybe they weren't great movies, maybe they had some flaws, but boy, the sound design is so spectacular. You'd recommend it for that reason alone. Any movies like that come to mind?
Yes, well, definitely. I am not a fan of horror movies because I feel like there's enough in life to be anxious and freaked out by. But any horror movie that you can look at. I mean, one that I actually did like was A Quiet Place. I thought was, brilliant. And so it's so funny, but so many people will say with horror, if it's too scary, they cover their ears or they shut up the sound. Like somebody just told me that this is several people have told me this. The parents would say, "All right, we're going to shut the sound off," because when the kids would get too scared, and that's it's like horror movies are the big place where sound really comes into play. They love doing the boo scare. It gets quiet, and then suddenly it gets loud.
As someone who grew up on Star Wars, like a lot of people, I'm 51. I was always intrigued and amazed when you find out the origin of certain sounds from that particular franchise. I think hitting a power cord to get the blaster. Are there any other maybe really unconventional sound effects you've heard over the years that maybe people would be surprised that how they were created in a sense?
Well, one of the things that like the movies that I was working at on. We'd do a thing like if you suddenly put something in the screen, like I did, was it Con Air or even like in Crimson Tide. But when you cut to something quickly, sometimes you'll put like an air explosion or even sometimes like a gunshot, but you put it underneath and it's just to punch up the cut. Mm-hmm. And so you're doing things like that. I mean, way back on Days of Thunder, I remember that was my first union studio picture that I worked on. And when the cars, and I always had the bad guy's car, the bad guy meaning whoever was racing against Tom Cruise, and I had his engine. And when the car kind of would just go by the screen, you'd also put like an animal roar in there. And I think that the reason why we use animal roars is it still hits us, and you bury it in the sound, so you can't really tell. But it's what C.C. Hall talks about too in Top Gun in the movie. It gives a cutting edge, but it also, I think we relate to it. We're still like lizard brain, like we're cave people, and we hear a big growl, and it makes our ears kind of prick up, and we kind of get scared.
Yeah.
And so we bury those things a lot of times in things, and you don't hear them as growls or animal growls slowed down or whatever. And also low end sounds will put you on edge. And I think it's because it means big animal or like an earthquake, something big is rumbling and making those sounds. And so we always think about what's the low element, the low end element. And one of my favorite was on Armageddon. I had the reel where Bruce Willis and Steve Buscemi are coming out of the shuttle for the first time to be on the Meteor, mm-hmm. which is really the antagonist. And my low end sound were those kind of earthquakes and the rocks rumbling and everything. But the high end was this cool wind through a wire, and it really kind of makes the hair on the back of your neck stand up. Wow. Which it was like it's just a physical reaction that you get. It's kind of cool.
Is it hard for you to turn off your sound antenna when you're in your daily life, where you hear things that ordinary people might not pick up that sort of just kind of register with you?
Well, in my daily life, that's what I love, that I'll pick up, sounds, and I'll be aware of sounds more than people. And sometimes by the just mere fact that someone's with me, they'll listen to sounds, and which is, kind of fun. So I love that in my daily life. But when I go to movies, honestly, unless it's something super, great or unusual or really bad, like usually it doesn't pull me out of the movie. The best sound in movies, it's like I know that it's contributing, but it doesn't pull me out of the story. Instead, it just immerses me right in it, and that's what I love. So a lot of times I'll have to go back and look and say, why was that movie so good? And I'll actually have to, break down the sound on a second or third watch.
You talked about how much teaching has meant to you over the years. When you're with a new group of students and you're trying to kind of impress them or kind of grab them, is there a go-to scene you use from a sound perspective that'll kind of rattle their cages and just kind of get them by the scruff of the neck?
Well, one of the movies that I show the opening of Hurt Locker, and unfortunately, I didn't get Catherine Bigelow. She agreed to be in, and then she didn't do an interview. But her sound guy, Paul Otteson, we had a great interview with, but because she wasn't in it, we didn't use this. But I'll show the opening of Hurt Locker, and it's just really interesting, the perspective. There's just the whole opening. You see the chaos, and so you see short clips and, loud sounds, and then the sound goes away, and you're behind them looking at the monitor of what is the GoPro, on the little bot that goes down to the bomb site. And, you're just kind of hearing their breathing. And then when things get tense, it's like they'll have a helicopter or a jet speed by, And, so what I do is just I love to just play things and then say, okay, pay attention to how is sound helping tell the story?
Yeah. Excellent. Before I let you go, quick question. You think about what's happening in movies today. We've seen Gemini Man with the de-aging technology where they can use CGI to make Will Smith younger again, and we've seen that with the Irishman coming soon. Are there innovations in sound that are changing things, the way we experience films, or is sort of just the fact that maybe the new wave of filmmakers may utilize it in different ways? I'm just from a technical point of view, are there any innovations or breakthroughs coming or that have already kind of came across?
One of the reasons I put Alfonso Cuarón and Skip Leavesay with Roma in the movies was I thought that they were using surrounds in a more aggressive way, even putting dialogue and stuff in the surrounds, and I thought that was really interesting. Mm-hmm. As far as, we've got 64 tracks with Atmos, and I think that it's just going to be more immersive, is what I can see. And then one of the issues, though, is people are seeing things, more on computers and smaller screens. So sound will be all more important because of that, but it does bring it down to just kind of 2 channels. I think that what we're going to get is we're going to get great earbuds, and we are already, because of VR, getting better headphones that are feels 360. Mm-hmm. And I think that's kind of where some of it will be. And I don't know. I think that screening in cinemas won't go away, but we might have more you've got the LFE, the low frequency kind of channels. Maybe we'll even be reverberating, kind of shaking underneath your seats, or even, everyone has their own little speakers, near field speakers, on their chairs or something, but it's really hard to say. The other thing that though could really be, you can create something from nothing as far as a visual effect, but sound, you still need an essence of some kind of sound. Mm-hmm. And I think what's going to happen is you're going to be able to create a lion roar from absolutely nothing, and they're working on things like that where you can create even the human voice. But we don't quite have that technology where you can create anything at all like we do with visual effects.
Yes. Technology moves quickly. We'll see what happens. But thank you, Midge, for joining the HitCast. Midge's essential new documentary is called Making Waves, The Art of Cinematic Sound. It opens in L.A. and New York October 25th, then expands from there. You will never experience a movie the same way again after you see it, and that's a good thing. Congratulations, Midge, on a wonderful film.
Thanks, Christian.
Well, thanks again for listening. Don't forget to check out HollywoodandToto.com for both the show notes and, of course, the latest entertainment news. Please follow me at Twitter at HollywoodandToto. And we'd love it if you leave a podcast review over at iTunes. See you next week.